I believe Trustee Arndorfer is in transit. And so it might just be you and I, Trustee Warren, today.
We'll have to hold down the fort.
Okay. And today we're going to consider, it's let's see, I should note 6:02 for the minutes. And we're going to discuss sewer rates related to the Southeast Area Combined Infrastructure Project. And so I'll hand it off to a staff and Director Emmanuelson, please.
Absolutely. We've been talking for a number of years about kind of incrementally increasing our sewer rates to be prepared for the eventual debt service and bond costs for the Southeast Sewer Project. So this is the second step of this process. And it's primarily driven by the Southeast Sewer Project anticipated debt service costs, but it's also driven by your normal annual cost increases. MMSD raises their fees, and but the vast majority of this is driven by the anticipation of the Southeast Sewer Project. So the memo is a refresh of the last time we did this in 2019. Kind of looking at what MMSD's current charges are, looking at what our costs are for customer accounts, and then looking at what our costs are for providing sewer wastewater services, and then looking at again what we think our projected debt service is going to be in a couple of years. And in addition, you might recall we recently just borrowed a little over $1 million or about $1 million for the 4480 Lake Drive project, as well as a little over $1 million for engineering and design costs that we are well underway for the Southeast Sewer Project. So those are already on the books. The rates that staff is proposing for 2021 would get us to cover about $10 million in additional project costs. We'll see where all the final numbers come in and how the phasing comes in once we get a little further down the road. But again, just trying to take some incremental steps along the way. It strengthens the utility's position to be able to borrow funds, hopefully at a better or the best rate possible for the size of our utility. And it allows us to cash fund some of the smaller capital projects along the way, so we don't have to borrow money to do that. And then once we get the final cost for the Southeast Sewer Project, that will kind of balance the approach to make a third step not quite as dramatic as would otherwise be necessary if we hadn't been kind of taking these interim steps along the way. So with that in the memo, I will answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, it is staff's hope that the committee will recommend this for approval to the village board.
So I'm trying to get to the right place here.
So did I see Director Emmanuelson? So it's a 27% increase in the, I see it's a two-part fee, right? You have the facility and the volume.
Correct. And
so the last increase in 2 years ago was, I believe, a double digit. You said 20.
I think it's 18% is what that netted out to.
18%, and now we're going for when you combine, this is the 27% increase in volume rates?
27% volume and 8.5% in fixed. So the basic net out of that is about 25%, and that is what we've been suggesting is being the fiscal intent in the long range plan for the last several cycles.
So I guess I don't understand how you go from, you have 27 and 8 and you get 25.
Yeah, there's a table down below.
Right.
That shows the impacts and the changes. Again, the fixed portion of the bill is much smaller increase than the volume portion.
So the facilities,
Right, so when they add up, the net impact is approximately 25%, depending on how much volume you use. And the table was added to help illustrate that effect.
So,
go ahead, trustee Warren.
so Mark, could you walk me through, I mean, I get it. So basically we need these two charges to equal what our costs are. And this is a way of making sure that of making the levers go right so that they cover the cost, and there might be a little extra in the utility. Is that right? I'm just trying to make the numbers work in my head. When I reviewed this, I wanted to figure out how it worked, how they work together. Could you walk me through that kind of on a basic level?
Sure.
Just so I can make sure I have it right before we vote on this.
Absolutely. The facilities charges are current costs.
Okay.
We look at our current costs in the utility and what MMSD is charging for the applicable portion of utility operations costs. That's a pretty straightforward math. The proposed volume rate is taking steps towards what the eventual rate is going to be needed in 2025. Right now, we project that to be $9.25 per 100 cubic feet or equivalent. So we're going from proposing to go from 550 to 7 with an ultimate goal, or I shouldn't say a goal, but an expectation that to complete a $20 million Southeast sewer projects, the volume rate will need to be $9.25 per 100 cubic feet to cover that debt service cost.
So in 2025, once, in connection with the project down there, we're going to need about 925. We're currently sitting at 550. So this is the incremental step to try to get us there, based on anticipating 400,000. Trying to see what is the unit?
100 cubic feet CCF.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, this is not a full leap. It's an incremental step. If the project comes in at under 20 million, we will not need to go that far. But if bond rates go up, then our costs change. We're pretty comfortable that we shouldn't have to exceed 9.25 once the project's completed. But until everything is signed, sealed, and delivered, that's just a projection. So again, looking just to take another step in that direction so that we don't have to effectively double rates when we get to that point. So
what is the impact on let's take a usual benchmark we use is a $300,000 home. What is the impact on that here?
Well, the impact here is based on consumption, and there's a table on the memo that kind of gives a variety of outlooks for consumption. The typical average single-family home, or I shouldn't say residential unit, is about 15 CCFs per quarter. And that covers 3,200 out of the 3,490 utility customers.
So basically, they're looking at an increase of 24 plus the one, about $26 total.
It'd be $23.55.
What about, does that include the facilities charge increase?
Yeah, the table's got a change. The second line from the bottom is a change. The bottom line is the percentage change.
Okay, so 23.55 for the average home. Okay.
And so I guess one of my questions would be, the total utility fiscal needs, it looked to me, 2022 is 2.5 million, 2025 is 3.9. have projections for 2023 and 2024?
No, I do not. It depends on how that project is implemented and what phases it is. So
Okay,
again, we're looking at an end total cost, and I can anticipate what the debt service will be for that. But how that's implemented along the way will be fine tuned over the next year and a half.
okay. It does look like the village portion, the customer related administration is very flat. So we're doing our part. But we have no control over MMSD's rates, right? And the facilities is obviously the smaller portion of this puzzle.
Yeah, MMSD has had some increases, but again, the mother load of the cost drivers here is debt service on a $20 million project. So that's really what's driving this scenario. Otherwise, we would be looking at a 5 to 10% increase every couple of years, consistent with just cost increases. But again, we're expecting a dramatic increase in debt service with the $20 million project.
So this is a product of increase in operating costs, what MMSD charges us, and also the project itself. It's those three things combining up, right?
Correct. Again, if I had to say MMSD's costs are probably 10% of that, other operating costs are another 10%, and 80% of these costs are debt service related.
Got it.
So the current low interest rate environment should be helpful.
Yeah. I mean, if you do the long-term math on that, that can be millions of dollars of savings just because this is being done when interest rates are really historically low.
I guess my only comment would be that considering that we're adding the public fire protection fee this year to the bills, and if we approve this, it's another increase, obviously. It's just something to be aware of at the time that we're looking at the final budget, to be mindful of what we've already done to increase costs for property owners and residents.
Yep. Well, I agree with that, and I think I'm ready to make a motion here. I move to recommend approval of an ordinance to amend the village's sanitary sewer user charge system fees as proposed.
I'll second that. And we'll take a vote of 2. All in favor? Aye.
Pretty clear how that vote was going to go, but
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And thank you, Mark, for all you've done on this and for your explanations. And we will be seeing you in the budgetary future.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, and we'll see you.
Does this link stay up for the next meeting?
For the community and business relations, I think we do, actually. I'm
Yeah.
looking at these
Yeah,
numbers.
keep this blank.
Okay, we do.
Very good.
Good point, Mark. Thank you, Director
Okay.
Mankus.
So Kathy, is this you or me? And Jerry,
Yeah.
I think you
I-
volunteered first, so.
I volunteered, but it's okay. I'm on a roll, I guess.
Yeah, keep going, please.
Trustee Arndorfer is in transit, and so I will call the Community and Business Relations Committee meeting to order at 6:16 on June 21. And we have a quorum. And so our first item is, and the recording is on, is that correct? Yeah. Okay, we have considered an RFP process for Atwater Beach lifeguards, and I'll turn it over to staff, please, with Assistant Manager Burkhart.
Thanks, Trustee Stokebrand. The first item in front of you tonight is an RFP process for Atwater Beach lifeguards. Just to be clear, this is for next year's process. We still have the coastline services we've contracted with for the last few years, who will be doing 2021. Eric Gitson, who's in charge of coastline services, has informed the village that this would be his final year. This is the last year of his contract anyways. So in talking with him, he's ready to do some other things in the summer. We want to get out early and issuing an RFP. So this is fairly similar to the RFP that we issued back a few years ago. We've done some initial research to just identify who are some other potential vendors who could provide these services. I have been in contact with at least 2 vendors who aren't in the Milwaukee area, but the Chicago area, and kind of similar to, I think, crossing guards, where they have people manage, not locally, but either from the region or from afar, but they would still be able to provide those services. And that's talking with the 2 vendors, that's a typical thing they do with a lot of different locations throughout the country. And both of the vendors that I talked with have like lakefront experience with lifeguards, since that's a different skill set when it comes to being a lifeguard than in like an indoor pool. I've also talked with Fox Point, who they have an indoor pool, but they have an organization structure that allows for the management of lifeguards. So when we issue the RFP, I will be asking Fox Point to consider sending proposals to see if there could be a consolidation of services there. We continue to ask the school district to see if they would have interest. They have expressed at this time they do not have interest in submitting a proposal. That was the entity that provided services in 2003 and prior, but they have relayed that they do not have interest. So we're hoping to get a few submissions. When we would get the submissions, we would then sit down and review with a selection committee, which would have a trustee serve on that selection committee to determine if we could make a recommendation or not on a vendor. If we did have a recommendation on a vendor, that's where we would draft a service agreement, and that would come forward to the board for review and approval. So our hope is that we can have an idea by early August. So that way for the 2022 budget, we have an idea of what to program in there for Atwater Beach lifeguards. So that's it for my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So,
Trustee Warren?
so Tyler, to recap as I'm understanding it, essentially it's hard to find a counterparty to do this. So we're looking at two outfits based out of Illinois, and possibly combining services with Fox Point. And this is just for the, right now what we're approving is the RFP, just to figure out what the lay of the land is vis-a-vis us trying to get lifeguards down there. Because it sounds like, looking back through the history, looks like last time we did this, we got 1 response, and the county stopped, and that was subsequent to the county not providing these services anymore. Is that kind of the lay of the land here? We're just trying to cast a wide net and see what we can reel in.
Yeah, I just want to get cost estimates so you can see it as a board, what the cost estimates are, and then determine moving forward if for that cost, if that's a service that you want to continue providing or not. So that's what this is. That's what we're initiating.
Do you know if the Illinois firms are they planning on responding to do you know if they're definitely going to submit something, or is it more of a kind of just preliminary conversations?
Yeah, I make no guarantees, but when I talked with them, they're interested.
Okay.
And the only warning they gave me is I let them know what the current budget was that we provide services now, and they said they probably could not do it for that amount. So if we were to go with one of those vendors, more than likely it would be at a higher rate.
Okay.
But that's all I know at this time with those 2. And maybe we'll get beyond Fox Point or those 2 outside vendors. Maybe we'll get others who will hear. I mean, we'll blast this out in all of our communication channels, hoping that maybe someone You know, if there's a teacher who in the summer would want to start their LLC and do a similar arrangement, you know, that would be something that we would welcome as well. You know, one of the groups I plan on communicating with is the Surfrider Foundation. And also, you know, at least asking the schools if there's any teachers that would be interested in coordinating this in the summer, because I think there's some outside the box, you know, ideas that could come to fruition. So we'll use this RFP process to see if, you know, if there's any outside the box ideas that are out there that we're not aware of at this moment.
So sorry, one last question.
Right.
Did they give you an idea of what they mean by more? Is that like more 3,000 more, or more, we're gonna take the price and double it more?
One didn't tell me. One said it would be significantly more.
Okay, that's not the answer I was hoping for, but you know, you can see.
So we'll see what the numbers are. Yeah, at this time, I don't want to say any specific numbers just because, you know, I want this to be a competitive process. So, but my hope is that we can try to find an outside the box idea that would be, you know, at the cost of it is. I mean, it would be great if we can get it less, but, you know, that's where we will just have to pursue any ideas that comes to fruition through this process.
Okay, my question, so I just want to be clear, there's the Fox Point pool, you're thinking of possibly recruiting from Fox Point lifeguard program at Fox Point, or a vendor that's also servicing Fox Point is an outdoor pool, right?
It is an outdoor pool. The issue that we have is not necessarily recruiting lifeguards as much. As long as we maintain a good relationship with the schools, I think they're committed to doing certification through their rec program.
For the
and
outdoor
lifeguards for us. Yeah, so as long as we're doing that, it's not a recruitment issue, it's more of a management issue. So what we would do is Fox Point already has like 3 manager or pool managers. So we would work with them and getting out, you know, another pool manager that we would be able to utilize, but that would be able to supervise and train the lifeguards that are hired for Atwater Beach.
I see. So that could be it could be the management link
Yes.
between the labor that we've got for the outdoor, I'm sorry, it's called open water certification or something.
Yeah.
We got that at Shorewood High School.
Yeah, because the issue that we have in the village is we have no one in our organization structure that has the experience of knowing how to train and supervise lifeguards in a safe manner that probably for the standards that we, you know, that we want for the beach. So that's why I reached out to the, you know, the school district, because they have that in their organization structure in their rec department. The Fox Point has it because of their outdoor pool. I'm looking at those entities who already have like an aquatics manager who has a background in managing lifeguards.
And if that doesn't work, you have these options in Chicago, possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, we would encourage them to, you know, apply, and that's where through this process we would see how we can, you know, get it for the best value, but it also make sure that we have a safe and a safe beach experience for all.
Right, and I think we all have to be aware of the fact that the county is doing no lifeguard services for any beaches this year again, and not even for some pools. So, you know, it's a tough environment for lifeguards. I don't know. And it's tight for labor in general, but especially tight for lifeguards. And as to Wesley's point, this has been going on for years.
Yeah, the point I want to identify in the memo was there was a 9-year period, I believe, that Shorewood did not have any lifeguards at Atwater Beach.
Right, and I think we have to be prepared that could happen, just because, you know, this is just the reality. And I think I was just reading there were some drownings around Lake Michigan over the weekend, and they happened in places where the lifeguards were off at 6 and the drownings happened at 6:30. It's tragic. I do have one point on this. I believe it's on the task 2, item A, provide water certified lifeguard coverage at Atwater Park. I believe previously we were constrained by the school district calendar. And I guess instead of starting the 4th Saturday in June, we already know how warm it's been. if we're looking at someone who's not linked to the Shorewood schools calendar, could we possibly make that, I'd like to make that the third Saturday in June.
Yeah, for me, I have no issue with that. That could be something that we'll talk with the vendor, but if you want to bring that forward for the board to read that way, that would be helpful to know in advance. So
I would like to do that. I would like that change made, and I'll make it. I believe we're considering this also later the same evening, so
yeah,
I'll make that recommendation too. But then I guess I would want to make that kind of clear in the, I guess I could.
Yeah, so if this passes in your committee, what I would recommend is, I think it's on the consent agenda. So what you would do is you would ask for that to be pulled off the consent agenda, and that would be one amendment that you would ask to make to the RFP.
Okay, so I should not make I should move here to authorize this, even though I have an issue with the dates.
Yeah, just say the recommended motion that I have, but at the end say with the amendment of adjusting the start date for lifeguards the third weekend of June or something like that.
Okay, I will move to authorize staff to issue the RFP for Atwater Beach lifeguarding services for 2022 to 2024 with an amendment that allows for coverage at Atwater Beach daily starting the third Saturday in June.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And I don't see, I think Jim will join us hopefully soon, but okay, the motion passes 2-0. And I guess we'll move on then, if we're ready, Tyler, to item 2.
Yep. The park and beach permit. To tee this one up, since I've been here since 2015, this has always been an on and off conversation. When it comes to any community group that would like to make a request to use our park space, right now in our code language, we only provide direction of how to proceed with Atwater Park. When it comes to a request for any other park space, we don't really have a permit that allows someone to apply for to be able to have an event at that space. Currently, we what we would like to propose, and originally was proposed back in 2020, but we deferred due to the pandemic. And so what we would like to propose is amending the Atwater Park and Beach permit, so it's just a park and beach permit for all of our park and beach spaces. We have adjusted the fee so that the fee is comparable to our special event permit. We feel pretty good about where that is at. We've done some other research as far as what other entities have, and I think their permit for like a park permit is a little bit higher than what we're proposing. But we want to make sure that the special event and the park and beach permit go hand in hand with each other as far as being a comparable rate. We do make some other adjustments to the ordinance where we specify a few other things, and I'm actually going to pull that up on my screen right now because I just want to go a little bit more in depth. I find the red line to be a little bit more helpful to look through to understand the adjustments that we're making. One adjustment is just clarifying that the park permit would be when someone is wanting to use our facilities for vending, fundraising, or for profit purposes. Also when they're requesting village services. So if we have someone that wants to utilize the space but does not fall under any of those categories, they do not need a park permit. It's a public space. They are available, they are available to use the space whenever they would like. It's just noting that if someone wants to use our space for profit purposes, fundraising purposes, requesting village services to help with their event, that's when we would want them to apply for a park permit. Trustee Stokebrand, did you have a question?
Yeah, so let's just take, for example, the Men's Club barbecue. So they apply for right now, a special event permit every year?
Sarah, are you able to confirm that?
So they actually don't. So this is where when we've had the special event discussion, permit discussion, the Men's Chicken Barbecue has not in the past because the idea was it wasn't closing off the street; it was at the beach. But they have applied for a temporary Class B to serve beer, and then a short-term cabaret for their music. So that's what they have done in the past. So this would kind of they would apply for this as well.
So they'd have to apply
Instead.
for especially the park permit, not a special event permit, right?
Correct.
The new
Correct.
permit, and then they have to apply for the liquor.
Yep,
And they'd also have to apply for the cabaret for the music.
that is correct.
Okay, and
So
right
it would
now-
be kind of like a special event, but in the park, it would just be a park permit instead of the special event permit.
right, and then they add on the other two for the added amenities.
Correct.
Okay, and they
Correct.
each have their own application form and fee.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So this essentially, just taking the men's club as an example, this essentially adds one more permit they'd have to apply for. Now it's 2, they'd be going to 3. Is that
That would
right?
be correct. Yep.
Okay.
And so let's say the Friends of Atwater Beach, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a member, decides to host Surf Atwater. And we want to use the park and the beach. And at this point, we've never had alcohol, but they could have music. So we would need to apply for one park/beach permit. And if we want music, a cabaret. Is that correct?
Correct. And in the past, what became complicated was Surf Atwater did apply for special event permits. And then the issue was, will the special event permit cover anything in the parks? And there was really nothing in the code. So we said, you really shouldn't. You should just apply for your short-term cabaret. So actually the last time Surf Atwater occurred, they only applied for a short-term cabaret. They did not apply for a special event because they had that movie that they show on the beach or whatever. But this would then replace them to be able to apply for a permit so that we knew that it was happening on the beach.
Well, I think the permit process is basically to,
Mhm.
number one, let the village know what's happening, and number two, to make sure that the residents know what's happening around them, right?
Correct.
Absolutely. And I think the third benefit that staff has really seen over the years is it serves as a great checkpoint for the organization coordinating the event to check in with staff as far as some of the logistics. Because there's things that have come up in those staff discussions that have helped the event probably be a little bit more successful. Thinking about some of those little details, making sure that, yeah, they have the music, they have enough trash or recycling receptacles. You know, those little things I think can make a huge difference for some of these events. You know, public safety has been a big item, especially, you know, as we look more and more about, you know, protection from the streets and vehicles. So, you know, working with our police department and making sure that, you know, big enough events would be safe. I mean, those are all great checkpoints to be able to have before an event occurs.
I did have a question a little bit about facilities. So does that include, I mean, I'm trying to think. So there's Porta Johns at Atwater. Does it include, like, are we talking electricity, lights, access to water, a toilet? Is it, do we need to make that more specific? It talked about, I'm trying to see where it was in the document.
To answer your question though, yes. I mean, we're talking about all of that. Anything that's on village property that, whether it's shelter, infrastructure, that the village owns, you know, that's where we, you know, once again, want to be able to work with the applicant to make sure that they know, what's available for them, and if they are using it, that they're maintaining it in good condition without any damage. So yes. I might just keep going on the red line version. We include all the different sections that we have in the permit application just to be transparent there. And then this is where we do the checkpoint on like the short-term cabaret license, for instance, proof as far as liability insurance is concerned. And then we have a clause that we would include in the ordinance about no sale of alcohol should be permitted unless approved for a temporary Class B license. So Sarah, I don't know if you want to take a second just to talk about kind of what we were in staff earlier today about the two different directions with the Class B. And then as we talk about traveling breweries, of how that comes into play, I think that would be great to hear from you if you don't mind.
Yep. So at this point, the idea would be that any bona fide club or church or club, not for profit, could apply for a temporary Class B. This would exclude any for-profit business. So say Camp Bar or Three Lions or, Harry's or somebody wanted to do something at the beach. Their liquor license would not carry over, to Atwater, and they could not set up shop and sell alcohol there. So it would just be a certain group that could apply for the temporary Class B. And they're only allowed up to 3 a year. Now, the one issue that has come up is allowing a traveling beer garden, or if a traveling beer garden does come to apply. So by state regulations, any traveling beer garden does not actually need to apply for a temporary license with the village. They actually don't even need to be licensed with the village. So they have different state regulations upon being a brewery. And they are allowed to go into municipalities and serve alcohol if permitted. So this would probably be a discussion that needs to be had, particularly because we already do have a beer garden in the village. If we want to allow something like a traveling beer garden to come, I know there's concerns from the public works standpoint too of, just pulling that type of equipment onto the property, because they tend to come with food trucks and other things that are heavier, that it can, disrupt the turf. But they would not need a license from us. So that is something to consider in your discussion, that if you want to exclude traveling beer gardens or include them, they would only require the permit for the park.
So Sarah, sorry, you cut out like it, or not, my computer cut out like in the middle of what you were saying. I got like the beginning and the end. So traveling beer gardens, as I understand it, do not need this alcohol license.
They do not.
They
No.
will just need this event license. Out of curiosity,
Correct.
so what's stopping them from coming here now? Is it the fact that we don't have a policy, so we can't event any? We can't.
Correct.
Anyone?
Correct. So we've really not done any Atwater beach permits, particularly because at the time that people that we did have an inquiry about it, COVID, things weren't opening up at the time, and we just weren't looking at permitting events on the beach because of the space, and we were not even the 4th of July was going to be there, so we weren't taking applications. But I predict that it'll come up again in the future.
So another question. So if
Yeah.
we decided, because of the heavy equipment and because we already have a beer garden, let's say we pass this and we say this looks fine, but because of the heavy equipment, because you already have a beer garden, we don't want another beer garden in the village because it's going to rip up the park, and we already have a beer garden a few blocks away. Would we be within our rights to say, just no, we're not going to permit that? Or is it something where when we open this,
You
door?
absolutely could. Yep, you absolutely could. So particularly because we don't, it's harder when it's a county park because they work with the county particularly instead of the municipality. But like Atwater and stuff is our park. So we have a little more authority over our local parks.
And all of the parks within the village are our parks, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So we would be able to say, just kind of bottom line, we'd be able to say, we appreciate that you want to come to Shorewood, but we're a small municipality. We already have a beer garden, and we feel like we have concerns from a DPW perspective in terms of staffing this and getting the heavy equipment and small park, ripping up the park. Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
And so it also appeared that to me, in those surveys, those community surveys, one of the top items was not to have alcohol in the parks and to be aware of that. And we do have Estabrook Park. We do share that with the county, right? But they already have a beer garden there. So
Correct.
it sort of self-regulates in that regard. So because of state law, they don't need a license, but they would need a permit. And at this point, we're not, if we follow this recommendation, we wouldn't give them the permit. And I would be inclined to follow that line of thinking that I know I've seen them at Lake Park and it's a wonderful thing, but I think we've taken into consideration what we have at Hubbard Park and what we already have. I think that denying permits, so we just don't write it into the permit.
Correct. If you're allowing no alcohol in the park particularly for profit, we could argue then that they would not be allowed to come into our public parks.
And so, but the men's club would get a pass because they're a non-for-profit, right?
Correct. Yep, they're a bona fide club. So it would be like St. Robert's could do something there, the women's club, Boy Scouts, something like that, a club of that nature could come because they qualify under those regulations in the statute.
In which case we would grant them a Class B temporary.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's a lot of nuance.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot of little rules.
We wanted to take a few minutes just to make sure that was, clearly stated, and I appreciate Sarah's help on that because that's an area that I don't feel very comfortable with. So thank you, Sarah, for that.
You're welcome.
Expertise. Next section's about tents, just clarifying as far as the size of tents that we would typically want to allow, anything above, and then making sure it's not staked into the turf. That's really big for some of our parks that may have an irrigation system that we wouldn't want to damage. And then tents exceeding the size, because of the space constraints. That's kind of one of the main reasons why we're limiting the size of the tents. Probably then if you want to skip down, we moved a section on the use of Atwater Beach. That's just a new clarification section. And then for section 411, so as I remind you, this was when back in 2019 and 2020 when the Parks Commission was working on this. So Trustee Maher was finishing up his term on the board at that time, was the Parks Commission liaison. And this was a big one that he proposed that the Parks Commission really liked, making sure that we had a section that talked about that, encouraging, or discouraging of any damaging or injuring of property, especially any of our trees, shrubs, plants in the parkways. So I think that's an important section. And a lot of that language, I think we got right from the county's ordinance. So the only other thing I wanted to say before opening up for any other questions, I know President McCaig sent some comments over the weekend to us for section 400/1, private beaches. She wanted to remove the word bathe because it conflicts with the wet feet doctrine. So she, I think, wanted to propose amending that. And then for section 403, wanted to clarify that that we would prohibit permit events in the nature preserve, just because of the type of space that would not be adequate for a park permit that we are asking for in this sense. So those were the two things I just wanted to bring up at the committee level.
Okay, well, I would have a problem with to bathe because I believe you can have I think the DNR instructions are that you can have your feet can be wet, and that's what's allowed. And so that's a difference. There's a difference between, your feet being wet and bathing. So whatever we need to do, then I guess we have to have a discussion at the board level.
Correct. And it's under new business too. So Yeah, I think that's definitely a discussion we could have at the full board.
And
So
what
we
was the other one? I'm sorry, after 400-1.
For 403, well, she recommended putting it in 400/3. I would actually recommend putting it in the 400/2. Just putting a sentence stating that the nature preserve would not be eligible for a park permit because that's not what that space is intended to be.
So
Which
then, like there's no event.
I would, as staff, I would be comfortable with that. So I would propose actually adding it to 400/2 because that's the section that talks about the park permit.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't think we can have a fence in nature preserve. That would be,
Well, you know, there is the amphitheater, the little amphitheater there. I don't know if it's still, there's benches and a place for a person to speak. And, you know, I haven't been down there the last year. The garlic mustard kind of took over. There was a nice little amphitheater down there. And I don't know if that would classify as an event. Maybe it doesn't, but you know, I could, if that's what you want, I can go along with that.
yeah,
The theater was a little dilapidated last time I was down there.
In its day, it was quite nice. 20 years ago, it was a nice little spot. So I have no problem if people want to make it so there are no events at the nature preserve. I could go in on that.
Okay. So having said that, you know, so your motion would read the recommended language that we have with the amendment of including the nature preserve as a a prohibited space for the park permit. I think that would give us enough guidance that we could be able to make that amendment in the ordinance.
yeah, I could get by. I think I can get behind that. I think that there's a lot of moving parts. As Trustee Stokerbrand said, there's a lot of moving parts here, but I think that I'm pretty comfortable given the discretion that we have and that we retain with moving forward.
So do you want motions that we move to adopt these things, items 1 and 2 on page 35 of the packet?
Yes, yeah. So just to be clear, number 1 is where you would include the amendment. Number 2 is just the fee schedule. We don't need any, from what I'm hearing tonight, I don't think any amendment is needed to number 2. But if you want to amend number 1 based on what we discussed, I think that would be fine.
And is that regarding the nature preserve or the bathing word?
Well, it sounded like based on your recommendation that we would only do the nature preserve at this time. We could have further discussion at the board about the word bathe.
Okay.
So, do you want me to should I take a shot at it?
Go for it. Oh, I guess, I'm sorry. I see someone is here. Is there someone who would like to speak to the issues before us from the community? And Trustee Arndorfer, I can hand this off anytime or I can keep going. Let me know.
Yeah, Russ Davis is
proceed.
raising his hand.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody can hear me.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, my spectrum dropped right at probably the most important part, so I lost a little bit. Just my concerns, I think you were talking about permits for using the parks and also the pop-up beer garden, I believe.
I think we refer to it as a traveling beer garden, but I think we're both talking about the same thing.
Right. And I did share my concerns with Rebecca. You might have seen those. And also any permits for the parks, especially Hubbard Park, for the fact that we have such limited parking already. But I like the idea. It's just, especially at the park when we have so much, we have a wedding in each building and a beer garden going on. I just wanted to bring up my concerns about that.
And so what is your biggest concern? Is it not necessarily the park land, but the parking that the attractions would draw and the competition for parking?
That's part of it. And we already do ceremonies down by the river. We've been doing them for 11 years now, and people have been doing, my predecessor has been doing them for gosh knows how many years before that. I'm not trying to take advantage of the park. It's such a tradition to have those weddings down there, and I hate to lose that. a few weeks back, somebody came into the park, said they had a permit, popped a couch down right next to the river. We had a ceremony start later, and they were nice enough to move, but from what I understand, there was no permit for it. But they did tell me they have a permit. Again, I'm just sharing my concerns.
So I have to ask, so if someone decides to have a wedding and they rent your venue,
Mhm.
you don't require them to have a permit to have a wedding along the river.
No, because there was no permit. I did tell Rebecca I'd be happy to sign up for a permit and do that. That way, if we have a ceremony going on, we could get a little bit more money back to the village for that. My concern is we book up a year and a half in advance, and if somebody would pre-book before I could get in there, and then they'd have 200 people at their ceremony, they're not having a reception by us. They come in and have a big ceremony, and they take up all the parking around the whole neighborhood. What happens to my weddings, my receptions, my customers at the beer garden? I thought I'd bring that up, and maybe you guys can discuss it at another time.
And I would also,
Trustee Warren,
yeah, I was gonna say,
you were married there, weren't you?
yeah, in the interest of full disclosure, yeah, I was one of the people that was married down, well, it's supposed to be down by the river, then it poured, and then it became a heat dome day, so, but it was still gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, so, but yeah, I would say the one thing that I wanted to, I don't know if you caught this part of the discussion, Russ, or not, I wanted to make clear and make sure that we had discretion as to what we were permitting here. I don't want to open this door that we can't close, or we can't say, no, we have, competing this or that we want to make sure we can support. That applies to both traveling beer gardens and, things like weddings. So, one of the reasons that I'm comfortable with the ordinance is that the board still retains discretion on what goes where and when it goes. So, so that gives me some level of comfort here. I think it's also good for kind of events that are really good uses of kind of that parkland. So I guess bottom line, I'm kind of rambling, but we certainly appreciate your concerns. And I don't know if you caught kind of our discussion there, but we wanted to make clear that we still retain discretion, even if we do pass this ordinance, which allows for events within the park. So again, sorry
That's
about
great.
that.
I think I lost you for about 10 minutes, and I probably missed that part of it. But thank you. I just wanted to come in and give you those comments.
So I have the same concerns. It's a very small park, really. And, the spots to have the wedding. So if we have this master calendar without the village board getting involved in every wedding, which I don't think we want, right? I mean, I appreciate the notion about village control, and I certainly want to protect Hubbard Park Lodge and the River Club and the things that I like, that full package idea, do it all in Shorewood, right? On the other hand, as a village official, I'm not sure I feel like I should be sitting in and saying who's going to get the wedding and who's going to get their art fair. You know what I'm saying? Or is that the level of oversight we want at the village level? I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here. So how do we make that work? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I don't know if Becky's on the call or not, so I don't know if she can speak to the conversation with Russ, but I can tell you Russ has a service agreement with the Village of Shorewood for managing the Hubbard Park Lodge and that. So we would have to look into the service agreement that we have with Russ to see what we have in place there. What I would think is that the permit process that we have in place would be advantageous to Russ, because if someone wants to utilize that space, it would allow staff time to check with him to see, what events he's planning down there at that certain time under the service agreement, in relation with the service agreement. And if we feel there's a lot going on, that would be information that we would provide to you as the board about this group that's wanting to plan an event along this, that same time. So the permitting process, I think, is going to allow us to better manage, these large requests to utilize the park spaces. Trustee Brand, as you mentioned, fairly limited.
So at the end of the day, would it be a first come, first serve? Or would we feel like we would need, like, let's face it, June is a big wedding month where you'd want to say, I mean, obviously we're not going to change the agreement we have with Russ now because it's already a contract, right? And I don't know when it ends, but I guess my question going forward would be, would we want to say for Russ and the business, which we want to support, can we say he's going to get exclusive use to that park from 4 to 5 on Saturdays in June or something like that? Just because, you know, who wants to have their wedding planned and then, you know, oh, the park's big enough, we can also have, you know, like the fundraiser for, I don't know, make something up, right? Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself and overthinking it.
Yeah, like I said, Russ, I think I mean, in our service agreement, we identify what activities you can do. So if there's an activity that you're doing that's not in the service agreement, to my knowledge, that's when you would apply for the permit. But if everything in the service agreement you're doing now, there's no reason why we would need you to come back to the village asking for permission, because through the service agreement, we already provided you permission.
Oh, permission for weddings at River Park or Hubbard Park?
Is that in your service agreement, Russ?
No, down below it's not. I have the on the upper hill, I have the 2 buildings in the space between, but we have ceremonies down below. And that's not in there. It's because there was never a permit available for that. So we have been having ceremonies there. Could it be a situation where you allow permits up to no more than a month before the event or a couple months? I know my weddings a year in advance, my ceremony.
I would think you would have the upper hand there because people plan weddings far in advance. And so you could do the $50 application fee, the $50 whatever fee, and pass it along to people. And I'm sure in terms of venues, that's pretty reasonable. And then you're guaranteed the space.
So it's 6:59, and I know we still have one agenda item after this, but Becky, could you just answer this question real quick? We're talking about weddings. There was a concern, which I think is a great concern, that every time Russ would have a wedding that he would be applying for this permit. We would not want a wedding to come to the board though every single time, because there's multiple weddings that he's doing. My understanding would be is that we would review his service agreement and identify that through the service agreement. Do you have a different perspective on that?
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So what I would recommend, especially because it's already 6:59, I still think as a board, feel free to consider approving with the amendments that we talked about. I think we have an additional future agenda item though that we need to review Russ's service agreement and address some of the discussions we just had through that.
So I sense time sensitivity. We can't push this off to the July meeting. Or it's not necessary.
No, because the next item, the artisan market, that's for July 10th. And the artisan market is looking for approval tonight.
So can we talk about both these at the board level, or do we need to, I mean, I understand the other.
Yes, they will both be at the board level, correct.
So it's just we're not gonna be able to really report out we're just gonna kind of have to do it on the fly then, as opposed to reporting out a consensus at this level, is that? Because I'm assuming we won't have time for motion and.
Yeah, well, yeah, we would still be looking for a motion right now. So that gives the indication that it's okay to talk about this issue at the board level.
Okay, that was my question. We have to work through the artisan, I guess. So then we have to get through these 2 agenda items.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, I will take a stab at this. I move to adopt ordinance 3009, amending chapter 40 Parks and Recreation in order to make changes to the park and beach permit and add regulations toward injury, destruction, or removal of public property.
With the.
And I'm sorry, I'm
and then to amend section 400/2 to include nature preserve as a prohibited use of the park permit.
Right, and to include an amendment for section 400-2 to include the nature preserve as excluded from any permitting possibility.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. I see two. I'm sorry, I'm looking and I don't see. I see two, I see three. I see Jim is doing a thumbs up, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And then resolution 2, is this where we need some information about the weddings? The
No,
fees?
that's just the fee schedule.
Okay,
And from everything I heard, I didn't hear any amendments proposed to that section.
okay, so I will move to adopt resolution 2021-17, amending the village fee schedule so that the name of the Atwater Park permit is changed to the Park and Beach permit, the daily fee to be increased from $10 to $50, and that the group or organization requesting special village services with the permit will be billed with the hourly rate of the village staff to perform those requested services.
I'll second.
Second by trustee Warren. Discussion?
Just one quick question. We also need, in conjunction with this, we also need to look at Russ's service agreement to make sure that we don't have to do the wedding thing every time. Is that strict future agenda item, or is that something that staff can just take forward? I want to make sure that doesn't get lost.
I will, as staff, I will follow up with Russ and take that forward.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it passes 3-0. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We still have the artisan market.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, racing through here. I see that's on page 53, right?
Yep.
Staff, would you like to kick it off here quickly?
You know, now that we spent majority of the time going through the park permit, it's just the artisan market is proposing to be at River Park at July 10th and is using the draft application. Sarah, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No. They will not be serving alcohol. We pretty much covered everything with them. So there's no concerns from staff.
Did they end up getting their liability insurance?
They did. Yep, we're good.
So they're not serving alcohol at either the.
Nope, not at either event. I believe the first event, they are having food trucks at the first event, possibly, and they will provide porta potties if they don't have access to the bathrooms for the Little League. So that was a stipulation we talked about. And then for the summer sounds, they would just be showing up with their tents and selling. So there would be no food or alcohol at that one.
Okay, I guess my question here is, in my view, I didn't see a map for the Hubbard Park setup, which I think speaks a little bit to Russ's point about if you're going to bring events into Hubbard Park and he's planned, got someone, a bride and groom planning their special day, and oh my God, now there's a artisan market, right? I guess it would be helpful to have, necessarily required to get my vote, but it would be nice to have, I think there was a map for River Park, but not Hubbard Park. And also my question is, why would we not require, it seems to me these are really kind of two separate events that we should have separate permits. I mean, how many times can someone say, oh, I'm doing the same thing at Atwater, I'm doing it at Hubbard Park, I'm doing it at River Park, and I only want to pay one fee. They're different dates, they're different events. I understand it's a local organization, but I got to tell you, they seem to me like separate events. One has a cabaret license, they're having music. And so to me, I would like a discussion about whether or not these should be separately permitted.
We would issue separate permits. I think we're just, the idea was to combine it as one agenda item because it was new and you were still discussing the park ordinance at the time.
Okay,
so we unfortunately lumped it. Yeah.
Just to clarify, they have two applications in the packet. One's on page 55 and the other's on page 57.
Okay, so is it one permit? They only do one application, so it's two permits plus a third one for the cabaret, right?
Correct, that's correct. Yep.
Okay.
And they would pay all those separate fees.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
They seem like very separate events, and so.
Yeah, we agree.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
and the short-term cabaret then is on page 60. So they have 3 applications in the packet.
okay, is there any discussion on this item?
I can make a motion.
Okay, go ahead, trustee Warren.
I move to approve the application for River Park permit for the Shorewood Artisan Market, July 10th, 2021, and Hubbard Park permit for the Shorewood Artisan Market at Summer Sounds Concerts, July 21, July 28, August 4th, August 11th, and August 28th, 2021, and short-term cabaret license.
And I'll second that. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take I'm sorry, I'm gonna try and see, I can't see trustee Arndorfer. Okay, no comments. You're ready to vote? Then we'll take a vote on the motion, please. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 3-0. Anything else, Assistant Manager Burkhart?
That's it.
Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm gonna take a
I owe
quick-
you, Kathy. Thank you.
You're welcome. And please advise everyone, we'll be back at 7:10, and apologies for our tardiness.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.